What's up, you absurd junkies? I'm your host among hosts, Cole Adam Davis. Welcome back to another episode of Absurd Curiosity Podcast. For those of you who are new, welcome. We mostly talk about gaming, technology, medicine, science, a lot more science than gaming, but really, we just make sure to laugh and have a great time while doing so. Conversation you're going to see change the way that I operate. I maybe really take a step back and realize, or more analyze my habits. Dr. Julie Gurner is an amazing performance coach / psychologist. She guides many amazing people to be better than themselves yesterday through techniques verified and justified through psychology and many rigorous tests. I hope you could take the lessons that she gave Sean, Steven, and I and apply them to your own life to be better than who you are yesterday and to reach the potential you deserve. I hope you enjoy this video. Thank you for watching.
We have a couple questions. We got to talk to you for about 10 or 15 minutes already, and that was great. We have some other questions that have nothing to do with the podcast. These are really out there, but they're just a way to break the ice, and we call them icebreakers. So Cole, without further ado, if you would like to go with the first icebreaker.
Yeah, sure. Did you, Dr. Julie, did you ever use my dumpling recipe whatsoever?
I did not use it. I have been cooking on weekends, and my weekends have been insanely busy lately. The pandemic, if anybody is going to reach out to a psychology doctor, this has been the So the dumplings have taken a back burner for now, but I still have the recipe on lock and ready to go.
Have you made my burger recipe then, at least?
I haven't, but let me tell you, they look delicious, and I see them all the time.
And they're mouth-watering. So if you're going to recommend a book, do you have a favorite book, but that's not a self-help book?
I love Annie Duke's Thinking in Bets. If that's too close, let me know. But I think that book really challenges people to think differently, and it challenged me to think differently. And that's tough to do sometimes. So I appreciated her perspective. And, coming from a background where, she's a former poker player, she also has some training in psychology. And I loved her approach to, how to make decisions and how to think about things in a very different way. So it's probably one of my favorites. Another one that I really love is Felix Dennis had a book, How to Be Rich. And the thing I love about that book is that the guy wrote it himself, and he takes a lot of pride in that. And most of the time when people write books like this, they don't write them themselves, they use ghostwriters. Felix Dennis has a really funny personality. He loved his life. He led a very kind of debaucherous life. And so he kind of really does it up on this book and lays it out. And I think it's a great read and a lot of fun.
I saw you tweet about gambling, something else about gambling today, or about bets or betting today or something. Are you much of a gambler? I know you like stuff. You seem like you have the risk, or it was something about risk. You have to risk a lot to grow or something, right?
I'm a big fan of risk, and I'm a big fan of taking it. And I love, I think that we were talking, maybe it wasn't you and I, but like I was talking about snow skating, and I'm a competitive person, and I think that really benefits the work that I do. But I'm a taker of risk, but kind of balanced risk, right? I'm not like jumping out of planes or doing things like that. But I'm really a fan of even like investing. I'm in crypto. Some people think that's high risk. I really don't. But there's a lot of things that I kind of place bets in, I guess. And I think that's the only way you get ahead.
What did you think about that $69 million NFT from Beeple that sold this week?
I think it's fantastic. That guy's been working, every day for 14 years?
Yeah, he got a big 5,000 days.
Yeah, that's insane.
Oh.
Big payday. And then he offered it all to Elon Musk for his one that he
for 420,000 or what was it? Doge?
420 million Doge.
420 million Doge, right.
Something like that.
I think it's fantastic. I mean, that guy's been working so hard. And if it was a guy who was building a company for 14 years, we wouldn't have thought twice about it. So yeah. I'm all for it.
It's insane to see how prominent money laundering is in the NFTs right now.
Really?
Yeah, I saw a little article on it. I didn't get to fully read it, but they were like, yeah, there's a lot of money being laundered with NFTs.
I think there's a lot of money going into art and, apartments. And there's a lot of ways that money gets laundered. So I think NFTs are just one way that's kind of getting attention right now, but not really the only way that it happens. So I hope that people don't grab onto that.
Yeah, art and real estate is always notorious for money laundering schemes.
Oh, 100%.
Buy it for $50,000, sell it for $50 million, and it's a fair market deal.
So, Julie, when I was younger, I wanted to be an architect or a chemist. I was never gifted in the math department at all. I ended up finding something that I was really passionate about, and I'm extremely happy to be able to do what I do. But architecture and chemistry were what I envisioned when I was in elementary school. That was like, I'm going to be an architect when I grow up. I didn't do well in algebra. So when you were younger, what did you want to be?
When I was younger, I wanted to be a surgeon. I was always a really meticulous kid. I was the kid that, like, my dad's watch, I would like take it apart and, much to his dismay, and then I couldn't put it back together again. So maybe I wouldn't have been a good surgeon, but I was really into that the meticulousness of those small moving parts, taking something apart, putting it back together, kind of being a mechanic of that way. And I even went to, when I went to school, I started pre-med with that thought that I was going to be a surgeon. And then I took some classes in, philosophy and psychology, and just absolutely fell in love. So I ended up going a different direction.
So what made you go from psychology to a performance coach?
That's a good question. When I was working in psychology, I started off very traditionally, and I started off a while ago. So really there wasn't as much like the tech scene or any of that. So when I started off really traditionally, I started off at a prison doing forensics. My area of expertise was actually like adult psychopathology and forensics. So I started there. I did some work at a hospital. I've done work in academics. But what I noticed was that, when I was working in this private psychiatric facility, is that there was all of this research that kind of was speaking about the brain, how it functions best, how people can cope, how they make decisions. But it's all focused on individuals who were ill, and getting them to a place of wellness. And I just saw it as a big pile of information that wasn't being used toward people who were healthy, but may need some tweaks and may need some kind of extra something to make them optimal. And we had all of this brain research, all of this psychological research, and it's just sitting there, and we're using it only for one purpose instead of reapplying it to people who are, fully functional, doing well, but might really benefit from some of the insights of that research. And so I just became kind of obsessed by that, and then began kind of exploring that. Had an opportunity to work with a startup company who was looking for an advisor for an email app and cognitive load. And I started to talk to more people in tech, and I realized, oh my God, there's such a need for people to really help others with some of these obstacles that they're facing. And they were so clear to me, but it wasn't really clear to them. And when I had the opportunity to do some work there, I realized things move quickly. The things that I do would be really valuable. And I kind of hopped in from there.
Now, earlier on your statement, you talked about forensic psychology. What is that? Is that like when Dr. Phil was interviewing criminals, or like what is that?
So, there's a lot of different parts to it. So I started how when you go to medical school, I'm sure that you'll encounter this as well. There's a bit of a matching system at some point, where you have your area of expertise. And for me, I matched with a group out in Wyoming who did evaluations for competency and for sanity. So, is this person competent to stand trial? And then looking at their mental state at the time of the offense to see if they qualified for the insanity defense, and, working with those who were standing trial for different offenses. The insanity defense is also, used if you write bad checks. So it's not always like a sad, horrible murder case. I did work there in my pre-doc, and then I went on to do some work at a Supermax facility for a while, looking at risk and assessing risk. People who were doing had various crimes but had some mental health issues as well. I worked in the MHU, which is a mental health unit. So people who were there because either of the nature of their crimes, they couldn't be with the general population. If you hurt children or you do something like that, you're not a popular inmate. But also people who were just, floridly psychotic and really had some real struggles. So I got to talk to some really interesting people who've done a number of different types of crimes. And, you learn a lot about yourself, and you learn a lot about people.
What was one of the weirdest cases you got at the Supermax facility?
Are you allowed to talk about that?
Yeah, I don't think that I'm able to give any kind of details.
Well, okay, yeah, but is there any vague description that you can give us?
Sure. I remember one of the things that I'll give you one from earlier in Wyoming because it would be, I think, a more vague and kind of easier to talk about in a general way.
Okay.
I was paired with a gentleman who did forensic evaluations, who was an older guy, really grizzled kind of Wyoming guy. And so we would evaluate a number of people all across the state of Wyoming for before they stood trial for types of defenses and things like that. And I think one of the more interesting ones was a gentleman who was a serial rapist. And I found that really fascinating because I was able to ask him questions about the crimes, but he talked very, very openly about, why he selected the people he did, what made someone a victim, why he chose the people he did. And I didn't ask him those particular questions, but they ended up coming out throughout the course of our conversation. And I think that it was interesting for me, not because he was a serial rapist, but because it really revealed, how people sometimes choose victims based on opportunity and really nothing else. And it made me much more mindful, certainly, of, where I go, what I do, what situations I put myself in. And it made me much more aware for other people I know as well.
Are there any lessons that you can share from that for our female viewers that they can, kind of like look out for? Like just like simple points, or is that something that you didn't really look at?
Sure. I mean, I think that he would always look for someone who was, a vulnerable target. If you're not in a well-lit area, you're not otherwise occupied or distracted, you're not somebody, he would even look at the way that someone walked if he thought they would be a fight. There would be a lot of different things that he would try to pick up on. And sometimes,
That's interesting.
The thing I thought was really fascinating is he said that when people would, so every now and again when he was walking down the street, someone would catch his eye and they'd say hello, and they would never be his victim. And I thought that was really interesting because they kind of personalized themselves, and
Wow.
all of a sudden it shocked him. I don't know if that's true across the board, but it was true for this
to distance himself emotionally from them. So
Possibly.
look at them more as possibly as an object rather than another human.
That is interesting. I'm very fascinated at how criminals work. I don't like them, obviously. I like people that rape people, but I think the psychology that goes on that makes these people who they are very interesting. Very interesting.
Very interesting. So I make that an effort as well. Now, when I'm walking, if it's really late at night or something, I'll make sure that I say hello, do something ridiculous like that.
Really? That's interesting. Huh.
Actually changed your what you
Definitely.
do. Wow.
Definitely. Yeah.
I didn't realize, as I'm a guy, I'm a small guy, but I've never had to fear of doing something. I never realized that until one of my friends, we were at a party, it was during college, and I think it was like 12 at night, and she was like, hey, can you walk me to your car? I trust you. And I was like, what? And that statement just shocked me, because normally if I just want to go out to my car, I'll just go out to my car. I don't really have that fear that somebody might come and take me, and that's really prevalent for women. I didn't realize that.
You should though, Cole. You're a tiny guy, so
dude. Okay,
you'd be easy to steal.
100%. They could just throw me in a duffel bag. They could just throw me in a duffel bag, and I'm gone.
So you got quite a Twitter following. You got you've been featured in a lot of articles and things. What was your first big break that you broke away or got Jesus was like an overnight success? Was it a slow ramp? What was the first
TikTok?
Big TikTok? Is your TikTok blown
I think
up?
that the first. I don't have TikTok. I don't think that I'd be a very popular TikTok. My life is
You would be
boring.
surprised.
Like, I don't think I'm.
You'd be surprised. You would be
Really?
very surprised. Yeah.
The therapy gecko is amazingly popular. It's a guy that dresses up as a gecko and answers call-in questions. He's not a therapist, but it's wonderful.
Is that legal to give advice like that if you're not?
He tells you right up front, this is not advice. I'm not a therapist.
This is not financial advice.
You are asking a guy dressed in a gecko suit with his face painted green. But sorry.
Oh my goodness.
God.
No, I think that my big break came when it was a long time ago. I've been doing this for over 10 years. So I think it was a long time ago when I was consulting with this company, and they were growing and growing and growing. And I ended up doing some work with their venture firm as well. The company ends up selling for quite a bit of money, like hundreds of millions of dollars. And then I think that I was able to kind of get more exposure through that. And then I began to get picked up by, a couple other firms, or a couple of other founders kind of knew who I was. And then I started to kind of take off from there. So it really was something that just kind of built over time. And then when the show Billions came on, then finally people kind of got it. I think that previous to that show, and I think that show was like 2015, 2016, I don't know really when that was, but there was kind of a place in popular culture where they were able to say, okay, we understand what a performance coach does now, an executive performance coach, we get it. Before that, they were kind of like, is it therapy? Is it, and they kind of didn't get that. And for me, I don't do therapy. That's, not in the range of services that I provide at all. And I think that was very difficult for people to understand. How do you have a doctorate in psychology, but you don't do therapy? But there are many different types of psychologists out there. There's quantitative psychologists, experimental psychologists, but the only ones that people know of really are counseling or are doing that kind of work.
What percent would you say of the people that you work directly with in this are people that came to you of their own volition because they want to get better, because they were voluntold from their, their employer or whatever?
I don't take clients who are volunteers. So I mean,
I like that word.
I don't, because I find they're not very good clients. If you're not internally motivated, I don't want to work with you. Right. I definitely have had employers say, I'd love for you to work with this or this executive, and I'll meet with them and I'm like, okay, they want to really improve. They're really motivated. I'm all in. But if somebody is sentenced to meet with me, I want nothing to do with that. And I don't need to take them. I take 12 clients. I have 12 clients I carry a month, and then I have some corporate contracts. But yeah, I get really fussy about who I take, because every person that walks away from their work with me is kind of a walking billboard for the quality of work that I do. And so, I'll fire clients. I've certainly fired a client that didn't want to get invested. Absolutely. So people who work with me, it's not just what we do during that hour, but it's what they're expected to continue to work on and to do and to implement and to execute. And if they're not doing those things, that's going to damage my reputation down the line. That's certainly not going to get results. And if they're not getting results, I'm not invested. I don't want that. I have other people waiting, and I'd rather, hop on board with people who want to kind of get to the next level.
So the opposite of voluntold, do you have anyone that you're I want to work with this person? Is it an Elon Musk or a Tim Cook or a Jeff Bezos? Or is there anyone that you're I want to work with them badly?
Okay, the person I would want to work with may seem
So you have your person, okay.
Oh, absolutely. The person that I would want to work with is someone that you probably would never expect, which would be Kris Jenner.
Really?
No.
Interesting.
Why is that?
Would be my choice. Kris Jenner has built an absolute empire, right? I mean, she's built $1 billion business. She's built multi-$100 million businesses. The woman has a lot of stress in her life. She certainly has a lot of things going on with her family, and I think she'd be an incredibly an amazing client to have, because I feel like that's a woman who knows she has no limits, and she's been able to do things that are against culture and win over and over and over again. She capitalizes on opportunities, and I would love to kind of understand more about why she does what she does, how she directs things the way that she does. And she also keeps a pretty low profile behind the scenes, even though she is really the architect of, multiple businesses that are hundreds of millions of dollars in value, along with kind of $1 billion or $2 billion of value. So I think that she would be an amazing person to work with, and I don't think that she'll be calling me anytime soon.
You never know. Maybe after this podcast.
Oh yeah, maybe at this podcast she'll be watching it and just be like, you know what, Dr. Julie Gurner is the person I need. But now that you mention it, yeah, she actually has some business plans that are wildly successful that I think even a person with a business degree would look at the plan and say, I'm not sure that would work, but somehow it does, and it works very well.
This isn't on here, but I feel like if I don't ask you, I'll forget. How important do you think reality distortion is to being successful?
I think there has to be a sense of self-belief that is really not influenced by what people are saying around you, that you can kind of modify your plans, and I think you have to be open sometimes that the path doesn't always look the way you think it will, but your sense of self-belief really does have to be firm. And I don't think that has to be delusional. It's just seeing something
it's a
that
harsh
other
word.
people may not believe in. Yeah. But seeing something that other people may not believe in. Musk does that brilliantly, I think, with Neuralink, with, some of those other things. I mean, they're brilliant ideas, they're important ideas, they have a place in society, and I think he understands that they have a place in society, but how those are executed or implemented, he really does have a lot more flexibility in that he's willing to trust his engineers and trust people who are experts in their field to make that happen. And I think that's exactly how it works.
Well, he is the techno king.
Yes, his new title is Techno King of Tesla.
Yes, well, it's true.
You have your New York poster behind you. I have my New York flag and my Brooklyn Bridge poster over here. What attracted you? Are you from New York? Were you attracted to New York? Is there some reason for you to have to pretty much were you like, did you found yourself there? Like what was the whole draw?
Well, I grew up on a farm in Western Pennsylvania, so New York was not necessarily like running through my veins at that time. So we had like a couple hundred acres and, grew up in that way. But I knew that like when we went to New York and I had visited a few times, earlier on, that I'd kind of found my tribe. Like the energy is amazing. People are ambitious. There are a mix of industries, which I really like. So you could be sitting at a bar and have a great conversation with someone who's a trader, a banker, but you could also have a great conversation with someone who's a founder, somebody who's an attorney. I mean, there's 8 different languages in the room. It's wonderful. And I just felt so energized. Everybody's ambitious. They're all driving. And it just felt like such a great place to be and really energizing.
What is the next place that you would rather move to if it wasn't for like the New York area?
And why is it Austin?
Yeah, why is it Austin too?
Not Austin. It's not Austin. I think that, the reason why it's not Austin, not because you all have wonderful taxes. So if you're in Austin, that's amazing. But for me, I think it would be probably culture shock. When I had to spend time in Wyoming just for the year that I was there, I think they might have thought I was an alien. I expected things to be done more quickly. I thought that people should speak faster, walk faster, like get results faster. And they were like, what is happening with you, woman? Like, calm down. Everything's going to be okay. So I do think that pace although I think Austin is better than many places, but I think that the pace would be very challenging for me personally. And I need a place, I think, like the city. A lot of people are like me. So I think if I had to choose another location, and that would be tough. I love Miami. I know that's very hot right now, but I actually do really love Miami, and I go there when I can because I love the beach and the vibe and the food and the all of that stuff. So I don't know what it's like now, and I hope that it remains as amazing as it used to be.
Cole?
Yeah, I was thinking about something to say, and then I just like completely.
You seemed a little deep in thought there.
Yeah, I was thinking, and I was hoping somebody else was picking up something while I was speaking, but no, nobody picked it up. It was just awkward silence on my part. So, so how do you run your day-to-day? Because I'm always interested in hearing about how people do that, because I'm actually quite inspired by Elon. I don't go as far as Elon does because he has people schedule like every 5 minutes of his day, right? I do every 15 minutes and I schedule it myself. Do you do something like that? Or like, how do you make yourself feel on schedule? How do you make yourself most efficient?
So I sit down every Sunday and I do a weekly schedule. So I know that I'm not going to be able to set something up every day, or I'll end up just putting out fires and getting distracted. So I want to make sure that I have definite goals I want to push forward. I have things that need to be done now, right? I have things that have a definite deadline, and then I have things that like I'm working toward personally in my business or progress I need to pull forward. And I make sure that I get in a few essential things. So much like you guys, I make sure I get in fitness time, right? So I block out an hour for that. I make sure that I have time where I'm learning. So I block out an hour to read research every morning. Make sure that, and on top of that, then I schedule meetings, but I always make sure that I have a screen break between most of them, just so I get that kind of cognitive recharge and I'm able to just take a moment away from my computer.
What do you do during that time for your cognitive recharge?
It's a good question. Like sometimes it sounds really silly. Sometimes I'll go and like get a snack. I'll go and like go for a walk and like listen to a podcast. Sometimes I'll do things like that just to kind of get out of the house, get myself out of looking at a screen. And sometimes I won't play anything and I'll just, walk around the neighborhood or something like that, just to think about a problem that I'm trying to solve or something I'm trying to to strategize around. And I find that that's really useful to have some movement while I'm doing that, because I don't know about you all, but when I exercise, I often have like music, like headphones or things like that. So I can't really get a lot of thinking in at that time. When I was at a gym, I used to use the sauna for that time, and I used to love that because saunas are so great, and they're wonderful for improving your like HGH as well. So I would always use it like after a hard workout. I would go there and I'd think and kind of use it for both physical and kind of mental stuff as well. But now you have to really be very intentional, and that gets really hard.
Oh, so you probably can't go into a public sauna anymore, right? That's and with a mask on too. I don't know how well that was. So, as a steam room, I think that's impossible. A sauna, maybe.
I don't know, but I'm telling you, I think now, I mean, the first few months after the pandemic, we were all like, I know that for us, we had Rogue Fitness on, like, as soon as we get that email that like dumbbells are back in stock, it was like Christmas morning when we finally
Me and you
like,
were talking about
our...
this. Me and you were talking about. I think this is why, like, how we connected originally, because they are really great quality, but geez, they are out all the time.
All the time.
Did you get your Peloton at least?
I didn't. In fact, I never ended up getting a bike. I ended up getting like a stepper and then some other things, but yeah, I didn't end up getting a bike. Although I know that you have a discount code or something for this Peloton that you're pushing. So
he does have a discount.
I love it. You know, all my wardrobe is Peloton now because they give you a store credit for the apparel shop when you refer, and so like it's like Lululemon and nice stuff. You know, so
nice.
I love it though. I get nothing and ride it an hour and a half every day at least.
Yeah, he absolutely kills it.
The only way I can keep the leaderboard on our fitness. So, otherwise I'll get smoked. I can't go out and run it. So.
Actually, I was gonna say, if you had an iPhone and an Apple Watch, we would be inviting you all the time. You seem like a very competitive person to get into it.
I'm an Android person. Yeah. You?
Yeah.
No, I just switched over from Android. I've carried both for years, and then I got the Apple Watch, and my work phone wouldn't let me like turn on the cellular data, and then I just made the switch. I was enjoying the watch so much, and then I did the whole ecosystem. Right now, I got the Mac Mini, the AirPods, the tablet thing.
So, in the eyes of a performance coach, why is Android superior in every way?
Just because it has a clipboard.
I'm going to be honest. I have two Macs for computers, and then
I do
for
as well.
my watch, I have like the Samsung Watch, and I have a Samsung Note phone because I won't switch from the Note. I actually do use the stylus to take notes on it, and it's a phone that I prefer. So I can use it as a mini computer when I travel, and so I don't really need to bring anything else. So it's really looped me in that way. And if they do away with that, which I heard that they are, I may end up switching.
They are, but I believe that. Well, they're getting rid of the Note series entirely, but I heard that they might be bringing the pin to some other phones.
The Ultra.
The Ultra or something like that. So, but I actually, that's the phone. Whenever I was on Samsung, I used the Note 8 for like 4 years, and it was fantastic. Like, it literally fell off the back of my mom's truck going 40, and it still worked for some unknown.
Was that the one that caught on fire? The Note 8.
No, that was a Note 7. Don't be confused.
Okay.
The Note 7 is banned. The Note 7 is banned from flying on airlines.
Yes.
So I've got a question. Do you believe people are born great leaders, or do you think they're molded into becoming one?
I think they're made, and I think that science supports that. You know, the most successful entrepreneurs are in their 40s, and that includes tech startups, and the reason why it tends to be in their mid 40s is that they've gathered all this experience, right? That's what they're able to use. Although we highlight the phenomenal stories of very young founders who end up doing very well, they are the smallest percentage of successful founders. So I think that when we look at science and kind of look at statistics, those in their 40s are like killing it. And it's usually because of the experience that they bring. It's not that all of a sudden, their genetics bloom in their 40s and they actualize into the leaders that they should be. So I do think that it's something that it is created and that you make. And, when I think about myself, even, I really didn't get into entrepreneurship until later. And I think that if somebody would have offered me an opportunity, paid really well, and that allowed me to have the kind of growth and be able to follow my own interests the way that I can now, I probably would have taken that job and been incredibly happy. But sadly, I don't think that anybody's going to do that for me. And I felt myself being very frustrated at work because, whether I did a terrible job or I did a fantastic job, I pretty much got paid the same. And there's nothing kind of more discouraging than that. So
I watched another podcast with you, and you talked quite a bit about burnout. It was some time ago, and I was wondering if your views maybe have gotten more complex since then.
yeah, I think that one of the things that I've seen is that, people are working more than they ever had before. Like when they were in an office, they had at least like they would come home. It's typical to do a little bit of work, but now it's like everyone's on a beeper. It's like you're always on. You're always having to check. You always have to worry about it, and that's a stressor.
Are we addicted to it then at this point?
I think the expectation is there. There's one guy that I work with that I just absolutely love him as a boss. And one of the things that he does is he sets a very hard off switch for his team. So he'll do things like say, all right, after 8 o'clock, no one is on Slack. No one should be emailing. No one should be doing work unless there's like the company is on fire. Like there's no reason to do that. Do not be like, he doesn't want people on Slack on the weekends. He doesn't want you working on weekends. And because of that, the productivity of his company is absolutely outstanding.
Really?
People have a lot of loyalty around that because they're like, I'm not giving this up. I mean, this guy actually has an off switch. He's, kind of a boss who demands a lot when you're on, but he definitely has things built in that are really smart, like having a no meeting Wednesday. I mean, that has been a game changer where, the deal is you are to be doing work on Wednesdays. Like that is your head down time, because what ends up happening is you have so many meetings, you don't have any time to get the work done, or you're trying to figure it out in between meetings. And, that's also stressful and causes burnout. So he says, look, if you have any doctor's appointments, if you have anything, make it Wednesday, do all your work on Wednesday. But I expect you, he expects people to be, on their game throughout the rest of the week. There's no reason that you should be going to a doctor's appointment on a Thursday or a Monday or, unless it's an emergency. But the way it's set up, it both gives people time, but it also allows to really push. And I think that's really, when you look at training schedules of even elite athletes, push, like you look at Kobe Bryant's training schedule, you'll see like he pushes super hard for a few hours. Then he actually comes home and took a break for like a couple hours. And then he'd go back to the gym and push a few hours. Then he'd take a break. You can't be like 100% all in for hours at a time.
Yeah, are we fooling ourselves in that way? My sister's husband is an attorney, and he like borderline prides himself in being busy and always having something to do. With my work recently, there's probably like, to be totally transparent, there's probably like a hint of like I pride myself in always having stuff on the calendar, and like, I feel like I'm like, the more stuff there is, the more I'm doing, the more, and then it's like, am I fooling myself, or are we fooling each other with this whole, oh, look how much I'm doing today, I'm so busy. It sounds like we're doing more harm than good at the in the end.
I think that you can see it even within yourself. If you're fresh, you can kick through an email and like even a more detailed thing in like 10 minutes. But if you're at the end of your day and you're tired, that same 10-minute task takes you like a half an hour, 40 minutes, starts to drag. So like the key to really having an effective workday is energy management. It's not time management, it's like energy management. So that's why I try to build in where, okay, I have a meeting and then I do this thing, and then I'm kind of recharged, I come back, then I'm like all in, and then I have this little break, and then I come back. Because if I have really effective energy management, I can bring my A game to the table when it's expected. When I'm meeting with clients, they're going to expect that I'm not coming to the table tired because they happen to be in a time zone that isn't convenient for me. So that's kind of how I learned to work it, and how I really coach others to work their schedule is to look at your own energy management. When are you at your best? Put your hardest tasks there, take some time off, and then get back in it. But it makes you more effective, and you end up getting more done and having a much more pleasant life. So I encourage people to do it. It doesn't sound as sexy as like I'm grinding it out, staring at a screen for 15 hours, but it's a better life, right?
So that's a remedy as far as what you help out clients with too. But is there a common trait that you see initially with your clients? Something that you say, hey, out of a pool of 20, there's something typical among all of them.
Sure. I think that the most common, if you're looking at like traits, is that what you mean?
Right, correct.
Yeah, traits.
So I think that
Yeah, habits, traits.
I think if I were to think about traits, I think about there's a concept in psychology called internal locus of control, which means that you believe, right, that you control what happens in your universe. You believe that you control whether or not something's going to work out or it's going to pay off or it can happen or not. You aren't giving that control to things outside of yourself. It isn't that, oh, the environment's going to do this and it's all going to fall apart. It's that they literally feel they can make things happen.
Is that a reality distortion we talked about?
I don't think so. I think that like they're very good at figuring out what is it that I can control and what is it that I can't. And they're good at letting go of the things they can't. So like a good example even for the rest of us is that, when you're on Twitter, you can see people raging about politics, right? The ability to control politics is like zero. I mean, it's close to it. I mean, you can vote, right? You can do those things, but you're not going to change if you don't like Biden's proposed tax policy. You're not going to change that. So you can focus on that, get angry, make bad decisions, get distracted, and not be productive. Or you can say, I really hate this thing, but I'm going to put it to the side and I'm really going to focus on making my business, an extra this much money so that it doesn't really matter. Or, I'm not going to focus on the things I can't control. I'm going to be able to drop those things and double down on the things that I can push ahead and move forward. I think they're really, really good at that. I also think that they're really super good at emotional control for the most part. I don't see a lot of guys or women who are bad with emotional control who end up doing very, very well.
But that's like EQ, right? That like emotional intelligence? Or is that different?
It's a little different. Emotional control is really being able to, somebody really makes you angry and it's not going to ruin your entire day. You may have some words with them and that may not show a lot of great control in the moment, but you're going to be able to move on, be able to accomplish things, do things. You're not going to think about it all day. You're not going to let it bother you too much at the end of the day. I think also it speaks to things like spending. A lot of times you get a large amount of funding. You're not like burning through that too much. So there's a lot of different things that we can look at.
So what's a good way to have emotional control besides just rolling up a joint and going outside?
Well, I don't really recommend that people...
No, that was a joke.
Okay. But just going to be clear.
Well, it's almost legal in New York now, right? I mean, they're very close. So.
No, I'm fine with people legalizing, whatever. If you want to tax it, people should have the freedom to make choices. But I really do, I'm not going to go on my high horse about this, but I think your brain is like the most valuable asset you've got. So, I'm fine if you want to go out there and risk like breaking your arm or your legs or whatever, but like your brain, you got one, and if you damage it, it can really like kind of impact the rest of your life. So I'm always about silly things like wearing a helmet from, while you're doing stuff and also with drugs and things like that. I'm not a big like fan, only because I think you've got this one brain. Is this the thing you want to mess around with? It's a real risk-reward balance. And I don't judge people who want to take those risks. I just think that you have to recognize it is one, and it's with the most valuable asset you've got.
Do you believe that those who change the world are a little bit crazy? Because I've been growing up, throughout my childhood, I was told that the people who change the world for the better are often a little bit crazy. Do you believe that?
That's a really good question. I think that people have to see the world differently who change it. I don't know if that makes them crazy or not. I think that my definition of crazy is probably a little different than others. But I do think that people who change the world have to see it differently, right? They have to see possibility. When you're creating cars, you can't really be looking at a world of horses the same way as everyone else. And I think that that's the kind of vision it requires. You have to be able to see things no one else sees. And I think, will other people call you crazy? Probably, and probably at the time. We're going to see that. We'll see that with Neuralink, for example, definitely upcoming. If you see those studies with pigs and some of the things that they're doing, there's obviously some amazing benefit that could come from Neuralink.
What makes you most excited about Neuralink?
I think that Neuralink can be absolutely a game changer in health for those who have, paraplegia, for those who are disabled. even for those, for example, who have things like locked-in syndrome, where they're unable to communicate with the outside world. So I do think that there's an incredible benefit to be had there, but I do think that there's also incredible risks that are not being addressed just yet that I hope to see addressed soon.
What are some of the things that you want to see addressed?
I think that, for example, let's just say that you have a neuralink, and he said, you could access memories, right? That's a really cool thing that he talked about. But let's say you're a mom and you lost your 5-year-old child, and now you have the ability to recall with perfect clarity every memory of that deceased child.
Yeah.
Your memories deteriorate for a reason. It helps you to move on. It doesn't give you that perfect clarity. But if you have the option of, as a parent who's lost a child, to recall and sit in perfect clarity with every memory, their first words, the first time they walk, that would mess you up. I mean, that would be a horrible, horrible thing. Would you want to keep accessing those memories? Absolutely. It would make you feel close to that person, etc. So there's that element, right? I mean, how much do we aren't considering any psychological impacts of some of these things too.
Yeah,
or like you spouse.
I agree.
I'm imagining a really dystopian film coming out of that.
Have
It
you
needs to be
seen
on
Black
Netflix
Mirror?
like
Yeah,
right
it's
now.
Black Mirror. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like a Black Mirror episode. I think the second thing too is the immersiveness in gaming experiences. Is that if you think about it, with a VR headset, I think that technology will get better. I hope it does. But if you have it actually implanted into your brain, and let's just say 1% of all people will develop schizophrenia or have that tendency. It's 1 in 100 people, and you get that person, they have a neuralink, and now you're going to immerse them in an experience when they have this genetic disposition when they're 6. That's going to be a tough. That's going to be very challenging. And I think can trigger a lot of things that you may not expect that it would. So there's a lot of these considerations that I hope I didn't see any psychologists on staff, and I thought I hope that there are people who are looking at the possibilities on some of these other ends, because I think medically it's a game changer and it's amazing and it can be incredibly useful. I think on the other hand,
1 in 100 is.
I definitely believe that Neuralink is going to change the world, and this is something that I read about quite often, Neuralink and how it's going to change. But I think one of my main worries is people with addiction, right? That suffer from addiction. They're going to experience the stimulated orgasm, right? So, and this has been shown. There was a study done where this lady had electrodes placed in her head, and she was given a button, and each time she pressed that button, she received like a 100% orgasm because it stimulated that point in her brain. And she actually stopped drinking water. She stopped eating. She just kept pressing that button over and over and over again.
Black Mirror episode.
Yes, just so she could just keep having an orgasm over and over and over again. And that's something that concerns me, because then who delegates how many orgasms you can have a week? Does the company come in and say, okay, for $6 we'll give you 3 orgasms, or are you allotted this amount? That's something that we're going to have to figure out.
Subscription orgasms.
Yeah.
Elon's already he already mentioned something about how they can.
So, well, Neuralink would be able to cancel the need for addiction, though. That's probably the beauty behind it, where it's not so much that you're chasing any of those feelings, which is you could override that and say, I no longer need, turn yourself into like a Spock, where you no longer need to feel emotions and you could just be pure productive.
But then where does our humanity come from?
Not in a Neuralink. I don't know.
I mean, I'm not saying our humanity chases an orgasm, but
yeah,
I mean,
it's wild. It is. You work typically with executives, right? Is that correct? Okay. What are some
CEO,
techniques?
Founders.
Gotcha. So what are some techniques that you would provide or review for delegation of just, I mean, delegation is probably as why does I need to go with that?
Yeah, I think that, as people scale, you have to look at, the thing that I ask them is, what's your highest and best use? So when you think about who you are in the company, what's your best use to the company? Is it setting strategy? Is it vision? Is it making a few really important decisions? What is your highest and best use? And making sure that you're in a position to execute on that every single day, because that's what's going to move the needle for your company. Everything else, you start to find who can do that work. You want to pull yourself out of an individual contributor role as much as possible at an executive level, And you want to give that to people who are capable, sharp, fantastic, that you hire, who can execute on that and you can trust them to do that. You want yourself to be able to focus on whatever it is that is your highest and best use. And for some people, they're running, a massive company on, I don't know, maybe e-com company. And so their highest and best use is really thinking about strategy or thinking about, something related to their distribution or solving certain problems. That these are the things, or making partnerships. These are the things that they should be focusing on. And I think that's kind of where I start, as I look at where are your best talents, where do you move the needle, what's your highest and best use, and then everything else try to pull off your plate.
How do you figure out, or what are your things you look for when hiring somebody capable? Because you can hire many people, but it doesn't really equate to having one really good person. How do you find that really good person to hire? Is it just like a gut feeling, or is it traits that you look for?
I think people are very bad evaluators of other people, and I don't put myself in a category that necessarily is that great either. I mean, if you look at people's dating histories, right? You don't go out on a date thinking this person's going to be a nightmare. You make that decision. Right? So we're not always the best judge. Even when we have great intentions and we have great beliefs and things look really good going in, and then you're like, oh my God, I made a massive mistake. That's true for employees too. Everything can look great on paper, and then things don't go as well as you had hoped. I think that what I do is I look for histories of execution. So if I were to give someone, I think poachable talent is often the best talent. You look at people who have done things at your level reliably and well at other companies at the same stage that yours is at. And I think that's really important also. If you're going from 0 to 1, getting people who've done the 0 to 1 journey, or if you're already a company that's established, having somebody who is able to work within that framework. If you're somebody who's in the midst of raising, a C round, that you're hiring people who have already effectively been a part of companies at that level successfully. And I think that's why this talent goes from place to place. You see people going from Google to Facebook, from Facebook to wherever, they go through these various companies, not necessarily because they've, had the urge to work at all of them, but that the fact that they're at them and they're operating well and doing well is sometimes a proof that they're able to function in other companies. So if you're at Google though, one thing to realize is that an engineer at Google may not be the right fit for a company going from 0 to 1, where you're going to need someone who's not maintaining software. Maybe there's somebody who's, doing other types of work. So I think it's really important to match success. And I think that that's a more reliable strategy of hiring than thinking that you're going to know better or choose better if you're able to do it. And sometimes that takes money, so you're not able to do that right away. So you have to just go on hungry and driven people. And I think that can also work pretty well.
My previous job, it's a long story as far as how it ended up getting to where it was, but it was something that I ended up leaving because I felt no sense of purpose. It was what do you say, highest and best use, right? That was the line. It's there wasn't even high use. It was no use whatsoever. Yeah. And it ended up putting me in a really, 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 really dark place. To the point where I was I need to get out of here for my health. I was getting paid well. I was treated extremely well. I was surrounded by great people. But I felt no sense of purpose. I wasn't designed for what I was, there for. And it's funny because now I'm in something completely different where I feel almost too much purpose. It's great. But it's funny how, you think of that. And then the reason I ask you that question too is, could you hire someone without them really being assigned a specific position and then find out their highest and best use and say, this is what you're going to do if you want to stay with the company?
No, that's a lot of that is succession planning and things like that. So I think that, just hiring someone with an unknown role is probably a bad idea in a general sense. But I do think that sometimes you'll find that when someone's at a company and they're a good performer, that they have certain interests and that those interests will align with their skill set. Usually if you really love doing something, you're often really good at it and you're really motivated to get better at it. But I'm not sure that I would ever personally, and just take someone on and pay them, a six-figure salary to figure out what their best use is. That's a real bet that I maybe wouldn't make.
So maybe you would hire them for something that they are interested in, or that there's already an initial level of this makes sense for you. And then if they say, hey, I'm really drawn to this, can you let me do that? Then say, yeah, I'm here to support you. Go for it.
I think that that's absolutely the case, that you find that a lot of people end up working through the chain like that. You'll see people who go from like one executive, like kind of maybe they're in product and then they end up on another side of the business, and then they end up doing more business development or something. You'll find that people will move throughout companies sometimes, but it sometimes also takes time to have those journeys.
Right.
So you have to be good in the place you're at, and you have to be patient around that as well. But I think frustration in an employee is always a signal that somebody knows they're capable of more, and that's really something that needs to be addressed like ASAP, because it does crush morale. Like if you feel frustrated at their job and you're capable of doing more, and every day you're kind of having to underperform or not work to your potential or not really feel useful or not really feel fulfilled, I mean, your morale is just going to be kind of taken a little bit every day.
That was,
So it's important.
That was the exact thing that happened in my previous position where I was hired. There wasn't an exact real role or position. It was meant, long story with it, but ultimately there was no, purpose for the job. So it's you go in and you're like, I could be doing more, but I'm not. Like, this is horrible. But yeah, thankfully I'm in a place now where I get to do a lot more. So.
And we're getting back to burnout too. And I really want to ask, how does the company make it clear that, look, we're suffering from burnout? What can they do? Like pretty low hanging fruit and like one or two things.
I think the low hanging fruit is a cutoff. Like I said previously, I think that's a really easy one. Is company wide. Like, hey, for the health of everyone, 8 o'clock, like, do you really need to be on Slack or checking Slack? It's just the cognitive weight of that. Like, I need to check, I need to make sure, I need to be like, even if you're not doing anything after 8, to know that you have to check until literally the moment you go to bed is like being tethered to your job all the time. It's always working. So I think that's a really easy thing that people can do, like that, or weekends. Companies are really reticent to do that. I think that they feel like it will show that they're not as committed or something like that. I think also other things to do is connect with employees around things that are not transactional. Every conversation you have with people at work right now is transactional. Like, I need something from you, we're gonna figure out a problem, but there's nothing that's like connecting, fun, interesting, that you learn about each other.
No more water cooler talk, right? Like,
yeah, nothing, except for on Slack, which again is putting you on a screen and isn't really personal, but they don't do the things like you do. I think one of the things you do wonderfully is that, like, you have this fitness competition with the other guys. I'm not sure if everyone's on that or just Cole.
We've got 112
Oh,
people.
yeah, we've got 112 people going on. And we've actually got some really amazing YouTubers that are, like, they've got 100,000 subscribers. They're on there. And it's just building up. It's getting really amazing.
There's some big personalities in it. It's pretty cool. And we've got a hashtag.
I think that's
trending.
Cool. It's amazing. So like things like that within an office, to say like, hey, we're gonna do a step contest, because it really encourages people to like get out and do something, or some kind of contest that gets everybody involved. That isn't necessarily like on a screen or in the office. I think that there's a lot of those elements, but also encouraging people to take vacation, even though you're going to be at home. Like, take your vacation.
I can't take a vacation. I have not figured that out. My whole professional career, I've not figured out. My vacation expires worthless every year. I can't do it.
You don't take it.
I never spend it. Every now and then I'll get a week here.
Right.
Go out I can't like break off the time. My whole schedule is just always busy, and I can't find myself. And also I have a bit like a team. I make sure that they can get the vacation, and they can go away. And I don't know. I just don't do it. I need to do it more, for sure.
You make it harder for your team if you don't take the vacation too.
Yeah. It definitely is. It's not good.
You got these great cars. Like, go for a ride.
I know.
I'm sorry.
I know. I backpack a lot. I'm going to go backpacking in a couple weeks and at least get out into the woods.
Okay.
What are some habits that you think I should develop before I go into medical school, just to like prepare myself for the medical industry?
I think that, energy management, as I mentioned before, and like how you schedule things is really important, and making sure that you're working to your strengths and not trying to push things into times that aren't natural for you. I think a lot of times we do that. Like, whenever I schedule things that are like early afternoon, I'm always like kind of on my downward slope. And in the mornings, I'm feeling great. So if I have a choice as to whether I'm going to schedule my high load work in the mornings, or I'm going to have it at like, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm always going to choose morning. So think about when you're really on, when you can really do work, when you're really like at your best. And I would schedule the things that you really want to absorb for those times. I would also make sure that you're giving yourself adequate breaks between things so that you're able to continue to hit it hard. I'd make sure that I don't cut out exercise because it's more important than you think, and like your cognitive abilities.
Oh yeah, it is.
That's the biggest change to my life I've made. And
really?
It's the biggest improvement I've had over the past year is adding an hour and a half of exercise.
I'm so much more laid back. Like things that I used to get angry about, I just don't. It's so weird. It's just like I'm like, okay, well that sucks, and then I'm like, all right, well move on. I mean, it's so weird, but it's amazing. And I've been saying this for a long time. If I were just some mad scientist that was able to create a pill with all the benefits of physical activity, I would be a trillionaire right now. I mean, it's so insane.
You absolutely would.
And it's
amazing. Yeah, I think it absolutely is one of the biggest things that people do. And even when I talk with people, I mean, that's the baseline things that I address immediately. I call them like foundational items. I look at, are you sleeping? Are you exercising? Like these are really important things to your performance and how you're going to function. Because, as you've noticed, it impacts your mood, it impacts your focus, it impacts your attention, it impacts your ability to execute. It's going to impact your personal life. Like, I mean, there's a lot of things that exercise alone can bring. It's going to help you sleep better if you're not sleeping well now.
Oh, yeah.
So there's a lot of things that are really important to do. And sleep alone, again, is really important. So I look at some foundational items first, and then just kind of make sure that those are on check, and then kind of go from there, looking at whatever problems that they might have or things they want to overcome.
On energy management, and I know this is not the ideal person to look at by like a million miles, but I was watching some stuff on Hitler just because I figured, I was like, well, this man was right, yeah, no,
just talk about Hitler now.
I gave a fair warning, but I figured, I was like, this man was, and like take these words very lightly, but he was a great leader in the sense of he was able to get people riled up, and he understood that component. And one of the things I found really interesting, there was a shortish documentary on him, but he took random naps whenever he felt like it. Like in the middle of the day, he would take a random nap.
Is that in between the methamphetamine? Is that the...
yeah, after petting his dog, in between the methamphetamine and everything else. But have you read anything on that, or I mean, on to break a little bit free of that? Any thoughts on like a siesta, like a mid-afternoon nap or something like that?
For me, I'm somebody who, if I took a nap, I would never sleep. Gotcha. So, but I do understand that they have benefits for other people, and I completely support the fact that if you're somebody who feels rejuvenated from a nap, then it's absolutely worth it. I think that if you take too long of a nap, it's shown to be a bit counterproductive. Oh, yeah. You can feel like you're dragging throughout the day. But you do want to, taking those brief naps if you feel that you need them, super important. And I'm really someone who likes being attuned to their body, like in what you eat. You'll find that like, if you're really good with tuning in, you'll start to crave things that you need, and you'll start to notice patterns within yourself. Much like, we crave water when we're thirsty and we're kind of dehydrated. We'll start craving certain foods because we have certain nutritional deficits. We have certain things that we're looking to fill, and you'll notice that, the more that you tune in. So I think that if your body is telling you, hey, you need to sleep right now, you should. And I think that the more we get back to looking at what our natural patterns are and being able to read ourselves, probably the better we're going to function.
Now, how do you go about, for somebody that isn't as tuned into their body, right? And it kind of sounds like you're saying, find your circadian rhythm, like your ups in your days. How do you recommend somebody going about figuring out what their rhythm is and how it's impacted? Do you tell them to like grab a journal, write down, at like 1:30 I started to feel a little bit hungry and track it? Do you do that, or like what's the best way to become in tune with yourself?
That's a good question. I think that usually you'll almost always have people walk me through their day. Like take me through, like, okay, pull up a calendar day and like take me through it. What did you have for breakfast? When did you get up? What's your routine like? Like, tell me about your day. Walk me through it. And you learn a lot from people from those types of conversations, right? Sometimes they get up and you'll have people who, and thankfully I don't have a lot of people who do this, but they're like, I go in the refrigerator, I grab a soda, and I'm like, oh my God, like that's not a great habit to have. No. But I do think that like you'll find that people have, and you ask them, okay, so why do you do that? Well, in the morning I feel groggy. Right? So that's already like, that's a flag. Why are you getting up and feeling tired? What do we need to look at there? I often recommend that people will get blood work. Like make sure that everything's good. Like if you have things like that are happening and you're starting to feel tired when you don't have reason, when's the last time you had a physical? When's the last time you had your blood work drawn? Like when have you really looked at to make sure that you're on track? And I think that that's super important. But yeah, so I just kind of walk through their day with them and ask them really pointed questions about like, why are you doing that? That's really interesting. What makes you decide to do this or that? Or what time do you get up? And when do you start working? What's the first thing you do? A lot of times the first thing they do is they get on social media. They check email. And so kind of asking, well, why do you do that? And sometimes it's not even because they care. It's just compulsive. They just want to see what's happening. And they don't take a break, like, with a cup of coffee or relax or, look at a newspaper or, read something online or whatever it is that they want to do. Or they don't have a morning routine at all. So I think that there's a lot of things that you can tap into when you look at someone's day. And I would encourage people to just look at their own day and say, hey, like, where's your energy highest? What are you doing? Why are you doing it? And ask yourself those questions. I think a lot of us are just going through life in very automatic patterns, and we don't challenge them. And I think it's really important to say, why am I doing this? Why am I reaching for that? Why am I feeling tired? Why am I getting up at the thing and feeling totally sleepy? Like all of those different.
Do you have any other methods that you use for time efficiency throughout the day, or for just being more efficient in general?
Yeah, I actually have a little, I know this is going to sound like one of these where you kind of flip it, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So it's like for 30 minutes. An hourglass, and it's just totally weird, whatever. But I flip it when I'm doing tasks so that after a while, I make sure that I get my eyes away from the screen. I make sure I step away from the screen. And then I'm kind of more effective in what I do. So my goal is always to spend as much time as it takes on every task I have. But I mean, like, as much time as it's supposed to take. So I could easily sit in front of a television, put on Netflix, and getting through my emails will take me 3 times longer than if I just sat down, cranked it out, and got it done. But in order to have that time of sitting down and getting it done, I have to step away first, because I can't just have a wall of meetings, get work done, and feel I would just go crazy. I think I'd have to stand up, walk around, do something, or I'm going to drag that task out. So my goal is always, how can I make the task just take what it's supposed to take and not drag it out longer? Because every time I do that, I'm making myself less efficient. So actually, by taking the time away, making myself spend less time at work, which is something that's kind of counterintuitive, but it actually plays out when you start recording the time.
So fully commit to what you're doing. If you're writing up something, write it up. Don't go on Twitter.
Do 10 things at once.
Right.
Yeah, have your time. You want to go for a walk, but probably don't be on email at the same time.
Studies show that it takes us about 15 to 20 minutes to reorient to a task. Mm-hmm. So so you pull yourself away, and now you have to get back into the same headspace, and you're costing yourself time. So if you're going to do something, jump in, do it. Don't look at other windows, get it done, and then reward yourself, go on Twitter, do something else. But if you, if you start distracting yourself, that one task is just going to drag, and it's completely time efficient. And I think why people believe they have to work 100-hour weeks, you're not doing more than a certain amount of work. Our brains just aren't built to do that, or at least not yet. So we're just not capable.
Good. So one last question on that topic. Back in November, I had my first ever panic attack. Not something to be proud of or to pride yourself in, but I ended up working till probably 12:30 in the morning, and I was just in the zone. Like if you've ever been in the zone, you know the zone, and you're like, I'm in the zone. And I was at my computer, I was at my desk right here. And I was like, oh boy, it's 10:30. My back kind of hurts. I'm just gonna go in my bed. I'll take my laptop with me. I'll leave this over here and I'll go in there. And I put it down, and 12:30 came around, or 12:20, and I just had so much energy still. And then I went into this state of like, what's going on? I don't feel like I'm actually here right now. Nothing makes sense. And then just full on panic attack. My body was shaking. It was bad. It was super duper bad. And I mean, even just from talking about what we've talked about here, and even from that time to today, I think I've learned that you have to have cutoffs. You have to go out for a walk. You have to not let something fully control you. But what other advice would you have for like something like not letting that happen to anyone else?
Well, I think, you have to think about, where does the panic come from? I mean, a lot of times panic attacks have no particular origin, and that's what makes them so difficult for people. But sometimes too, they're often brought about by people having high amounts of stress. So I would look at stress management rather than anything else first, and see, all right, well, if there's no clear trigger for it, there wasn't anything you're doing that triggered some kind of previous trauma, there's no nothing like that, it's probably just a high amount of stress. And so looking at if you can do more effective stress management, and sometimes that means, and I know you all drink a lot of coffee, sometimes that means
coffee since then. I've cut out all caffeine.
All right. So that's another thing, is that like looking at caffeine intake, because it is a central nervous system stimulant, right? So trying to look at limiting caffeine, making sure you get your rest, having effective stress management, which means like exercising, those types of things. Those are baseline things that anybody can do, and having those cutoffs. But if you experience those things, a lot of times they don't come from any particular trigger. And so, it can make people kind of scared to have something like that happen again, because they feel like I'm having a heart attack, or,
Right.
and it's often confused with a heart attack.
Yeah, and I thought I was having a heart attack. It was like, I'm laughing about it, but it was like the worst experience of my life. It was, not fun.
And it's so weird, because me and Steven were talking about our panic attacks, because I had them whenever I was working at Hetty while going to school full time. I was just working too many stressors, and our panic attacks were different. And, the symptoms of it were different. Whenever I had mine, I just wanted to sprint. Like, my brain said, run. And I was just like, I just had to sprint. And his was different.
Mine was more like the what is it, like the fight or flight. Mine wasn't flight, though. Mine was just deer in headlights. Like, it was just literally I just couldn't move. You're like frozen. You're like, I literally think I'm dying. Maybe I'm already dead. I don't know.
Not uncommon to see people come into the ER with panic attacks who have symptoms so similar to a heart attack. They end up running, tests and making sure that their heart is okay. So, I mean, it's a completely normal experience. But if you notice that you're overwhelming yourself with so much work and stress, and
it's
the
like
things are
right.
Yeah, and there's low-grade stressors too that we don't think about, like the fact you're living in a pandemic. Like, I know that we don't like talk about that a lot anymore, but like, we're literally living in a pandemic. Like, that's insane.
Yeah.
So like, there's a low-grade stressor all the time around like infection and death and all of those things that are happening around you. We kind of block them out, but they're always there. And then there's things around like the news and politics and, irritation, people angry on Twitter, that's a low-grade stressor. So that there's all sorts of things that are happening in the background. And I would also encourage you to like, try to think about what those things are and try to kind of limit those as much as possible. So like, if you're somebody who watches the news every night, like I probably wouldn't. Like, I personally don't watch the news more than like once or twice a week, because I just find it stressful and unnecessary. Like, I'm going to hear the same message every day. So it's never going to be great.
If it's important enough, you'll hear about it.
Absolutely. Maybe my mom will call or something, like, but it's truly like, look at the stressors right now. And it could be even personal stressors in your life as well. Maybe you have a parent who's sick, or, pet that's sick, or, whatever it happens to be. But you try to reduce the amount of stressors that you can, and kind of form the best foundation that you can. A way to look at it is that we're all walking around with a cup, and that the more full that cup is, the more likely it is to spill over. So you want to empty your cup as much as possible from stressors, so that it takes a lot more to spill things over for you. And I think that's a good rule of thumb for us all, is to kind of reduce what's in that cup. So we're just walking around and we can kind of put more in it when we need to, without having some kind of bad after effect.
Yeah. So I know you don't advocate drug use, neither do we. Things, some things that are curious, right? That's the whole podcast. So, places like DC and Colorado and, Oregon decriminalizing some psychedelics like mushrooms, for example, and you can get them almost commercially, in Washington D.C. But my question really goes back to like high performing people and using microdosing. That's something that's become pretty popular and talked about, especially like on TikTok and places. But what are your thoughts on that, of microdosing of high performing executive teams and things like this?
No, again,
no. Never ever give us self-knowledge.
No, I think that there's really interesting studies done on microdosing. And one of the more interesting ones that I've seen in the past is how it alters your brain's sense of time. So for example, that's why people say, well, I have increased creativity and focus, because your brain isn't necessarily always mapping time the same way, according to some studies. A lot of the results are based on self-report, which I think that has validity. But I probably wouldn't. I don't know the long-term effects of microdosing. I do know that over time, we do know that it has an impact on the brain. And people report very positive impacts, initially. So it's not for me to say that it doesn't help people. I think it can. And I think that people report very good experiences. I think I go back to my phrase of like, you've got one brain and it's your most valuable asset. And if you're somebody who's running a massive company, is that the thing that you want to do? Is that the risk you want to take? Because really, the thing sitting in your skull, I mean, that's your $1 billion asset right there. And so what do you want to expose it to? What kind of risk do you want to take? And, maybe it isn't a risk, but it also isn't well studied to know that. I know that the studies that we've seen have been primarily since like around 2018, but they haven't been as extensive as I'd like, and they haven't been as long-term as I'd like. So I would love to see, we know that recreational dosages of hallucinogens of any kind can have really terrible impacts. Microdosing, I don't know if that has a cumulative effect or not. I don't know what the outcome is. So while I'm fascinated by it, because I think that anything that helps us to access some areas that we have a challenging ability to access is probably fascinating to look at. I don't know if I want to be that guinea pig that taps into that. So I'm interested to talk to people who do it.
What are the things that you're going to look for in a study? Like, what would you, if you were to design a study that went around and just studied these different psychoactive drugs, what would you look for, or what would you design?
Well, I mean, ethically, it's very challenging too, right? I can't get a group of people and say, okay, you're going to take mushrooms for a year every day, and this group isn't. It's hard to have a study like that. So you have to wait until you have a group of people who've been microdosing for a while, and then kind of get their self-reports, like how they do studies on cocaine, how they do studies on heroin. I mean, they don't ever assign people to use this every single day and then study what happens. You get people who are long-term users or people who do use regularly, and you do your studies from there, and you compare it to those who don't use or report never using, and you kind of can compare their brains, compare functioning, compare a number of other things. So I guess that it's going to take some time before we have the ability to really examine what the brain looks like and what it may have done or not done, the impacts it's had or not had, how it maybe structures the way that we think and perceive things, if it changes how we think or perceive things. It's fascinating because even therapy alone, cognitive behavioral therapy changes the way that our brain functions. So if you do an fMRI like prior to cognitive behavioral therapy for anxiety, and you do one after therapy where someone has gotten no medication at all, you will see that their brains literally function differently. So our brains can be influenced by a lot of different things. Medication, no medication, the way our environment exposes us to things, very structured therapy, and certainly like mushrooms. And the thing that I would want to protect against is people using them for self-medicating. Like, you have problems focusing when you could really be addressing that in a different way that's like healthier and probably more effective. And I think that that's what I go back to too, is people are really, like with CBD, for example, I think CBD is amazing. I actually gave CBD to a dog that was struggling. My one dog had some problems. And I think it can be really useful, but I also think that some people who have maybe genuine anxiety disorders, instead of treating them, they're like using supplements they can buy off the counter instead of actually just treating the problem and living a better life.
So it's just slapping a Band-Aid on a big open wound.
Yeah, and it's not for me to say, whether or not they should do that, but I do think that how you use something is really important too. And I think if you're looking at it for innovation and creativity and something that's kind of jump-starting you, everybody has to weigh the risk reward for themselves. But I think that's a very different use case than somebody who is trying to use it for symptom management because they can't attend to things.
And so we're just like born into existence right out of nothing, and we spend our whole lives building up, this consciousness and this ego and this very unique personality to each person. What the hell happens to all this when we die? Where does what do you have any thoughts?
That is
where
a fantastic question. I wish I knew the answer to that. I am fascinated. I hope this is not on the recording that we released, but I am fascinated by these studies, and I'm sure you've read them. Sean, if you're interested in this. But like, of the people who say, I died on the operating table, but then they can also tell you the music that was playing when supposedly they weren't around, that the doctor was playing at the time, and that it blows you away, right? So what is consciousness? What is that thing? And what I'm kind of fascinated by, and this is going to sound so odd, but I'm going to share it anyway, is that there have been more and more research in physics around how there's far more than 3 dimensions. I mean, have you guys looked at this? Okay. Like Lisa Randall, famous physicist at Harvard, she's a theoretical physicist, has noted there's probably like 7, 8 dimensions out there.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wonder if those are outside of our sensory perception. We can only do 3. What's there? What's that about? And like, what does that contain? And like, is that something to do with, I don't know what happens. There's no way to really know, right? I mean, there was a great explanation that somebody gave. I can't remember who the famous person was, that they said that they thought death was like getting out of a car, that you go from one place to another. And I think that that's probably the best explanation. When I think about it in my head, that's kind of how I think about it, is that, yeah, the door closes on this body, this life, and like, whatever is there is there. If there is consciousness aside from my, neurological firing, there is some evidence, it seems like there is consciousness outside of our neurological firing. Or the worst, I guess, consideration is that what if we just kind of don't know the point of death exactly when that happens? It's kind of scarier to me because, during the Civil War, we didn't know when people died. We'd give them a little kick, and then if they didn't move, we'd toss them on a cart.
Yeah, didn't have indicators and things, yeah.
No, but like, who's to say we have the right indicators now?
Right.
Like, I mean, it fascinates me to say, I would like to think that we do, otherwise it's kind of terrifying. But, what if we are around a little bit longer, or that we have, an ability to have consciousness post our bodies kind of halting for a bit, and maybe that goes away, or maybe it doesn't. What do you think?
So
I got a thought on it. I mentioned the show Therapy earlier. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's like a sensation. You should go look it up. It's on Twitch and TikTok and all this. The Therapy Gecko, Lyle Drescher is his name, and he asks people. It's a people call-in show, but he asks people constantly, what happens when we die? Very often he asks the question. And one guy that called in was kind of a nutcase, but he had the best answer I've ever heard. And it's like, well, we go back to the same place we were before we were born. And it's, to me, that's a little reassuring, because I'm one that's always stressed out about death. When I was young, I had panic attacks about dying. I felt really tiny and my hands were really big, and like the world was closing in on me very often. And so I've always kind of just really thought about it, found it really fascinating. So that's the best explanation I can hear. He's like, well, what were you doing in 1951? It's like, well, I don't know. It's like, okay, well, what were you doing in 1870? It's like, okay, well, things will be okay, basically.
Are you really interested in life extension?
I'm indefinitely interested in life extension and transplanting my consciousness into a virtual machine or a robot.
Actually, I was going to bring that up.
Neuralink. I'm excited about it. I mean, I'm interested in what it could be, because can you get your consciousness outside of your body? Like, it's so ingrained. It might not just all live in our brain. How much of your body can you cut off until you're still functional? I think we found that all the arms and legs and most everything except for your lungs and your chest and your head is all you need to.
I have a friend he was working at SpaceX, and he's now become a CTO at another company that's working with Neuralink, and it's called Inheritance AI. And he's a coder, brilliant coder, and what they're working on is building an interface for whenever you die, they create an artificial intelligence based off your memories and your actions whenever you're alive. So let's say you have the Neuralink implant, and then the Neuralink implant records all of this in small tidbits of data, and then whenever you die, it generates an AI based on all your past history and events. So your family members,
but it's not you.
But that's more for the people you leave behind.
Yeah. But the thing is, what determines consciousness? Is it our memories, or is it the neuronal pathways that make us who we are? I think that's going to be one of the questions that we're going to have to figure out during my lifetime, at least, is going to be what makes us conscious.
Yeah, I think the sense of self would be really interesting to see if you can replicate, because you can replicate actions, but can you replicate this kind of sense of knowing who you are, feeling like, that knowing, that sense? I think that would be really fascinating, because there are robots who can replicate every action and every motion, but do they have a sense of self? I don't know. That would be really hard. But I don't think to the outside world, I don't think it's maybe perceptible. I'm not sure.
Thank you. So our last question, and I ask this to everybody. I never tell them what the question's going to be, because I think it's a really good one. Is there any question or topic we haven't talked about that you think is important that we talk about today?
I think that the topic that I would want to talk about, at least if you have an audience out there, is that, when I talk to people, no matter what age they are, no matter where they're at in life, no matter how successful they are or unsuccessful or struggling or striving, one of the things that I notice is that most people know that they can be better than where they're at right now. Like there's that internal sense of knowing that they're capable of more. And, something I'd want to talk about is like that sense of identity and what it knows about ourselves and what it will drive within us and what it will determine in your life. Because I think there are people who are going to choose to go with that, and there are people who are going to put it aside. And so I guess that sense of identity, that kind of internal knowing, what do you think personally, I guess, makes people act on that sense that they know? Like, you can talk to a group of high schoolers and you go, right now, deep down, you know that you can do more and be more than you are right now. What's going to be the differentiator between the people who do it and the people who just live with it and know it? And I'm wondering what you guys think about that.
I hit you with a hard question, and then you just hit me with one.
Try.
Turned it right back on.
Yeah, from my personal experience, I find that the people who have a lot of self-doubt are often the ones that most likely belong in the places they don't think they belong. And the people who are in the places they are today, probably, not in all cases in all of this, but maybe they don't belong there. And for myself, if I didn't get the opportunity that I had today for this position I'm in right now, I would say I'm not like worthy of what I'm not like, way up there, but to me, I'm like, a year ago, if you asked me if I could do what I do today, I'd be like, no, you have to be meant to do that. Like, you can't just do that. And just through a series of just paths that, work themselves out, I'm where I am today. And I look at it and I'm like, how did that happen? And I think it's just a confidence thing for myself. And that's why I asked about reality distortion before. I feel like maybe some people need to have that. we need to, or just I don't like the term. Like, I think there's something better you use, but we need to believe in ourselves a little bit more, figure out what we truly are capable of. And my boss described, he's like, I'm going to help you break through your glass ceiling. He's like, it's here, we're going to go through that. And there's probably layers of glass ceilings as you go through it. But definitely many glass ceilings have been broken for myself.
What do you think, Sean?
I think it's I think that people always want to do better. Like, you find something broken, you want to fix it. You find a puzzle, you want to put it together. You want all the pieces to be where they belong. And so, like, I think everybody has this cool, mind's eye of like your perfect self, and where does it want to go? Like, I want to be in a cabin in the woods away from everybody. So like, what's all the steps I need to take to get there? I was just talking to Lisa about that today. She's like, no, you're crazy. We're not doing that.
We're not
like, you can go do that by yourself. I'm like, all the steps in my whole life have been toward that. But, but it's just like, not really. But I think that everybody wants to just, be their best self, truly deep down. Like, and whether we motivate them to or not, or we've stopped motivating them, like, I find at work now, I used to be extremely motivated, like suggest everything. And like, I still try to, but I've definitely found myself more demotivated lately, because you get told so many times no, or you just don't have the power, or you don't have the bandwidth, or you don't have the backing of management, say all the time. And you're just like, well, I'm going to stop suggesting things down, because you get so far, and then it's like you get to the end and they're like, oh, stuff. And that we would do so much if we did that, but no, we're not going to do that. And so you just, after you hit that roadblock so many times, it's really demotivating. But I think that just everybody wants to be like, the best of all possible worlds. Everybody imagines this utopia place, I think, and what it is, and everybody's is different, and it's kind of unique. I think that's the unique thing, is trying to find what is their perfect, best of all possible worlds. I like to use that term all the time, but it's true. It's like,
oh, I love that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely it's a motivating thing for me, for sure, because it's like I'm always trying to fix something or build something or invent something, or I like to create things, so varying levels.
So for me, and can you repeat your question, because I want to make sure I'm thinking about it correctly.
No, I just asked, if everybody kind of deep down that I've ever spoken with, I mean, the people who do very well, people who are struggling, starting, people from my hometown, like deep down, most people know that they can be better than where they are right now. So what do you think is the differentiator between those who will kind of stay with that knowing and kind of live their life and know that they could have been more, and the people who actually chase it and try to find that and take that on and push themselves and kind of try to get to that place? What's the difference?
I don't know the difference because I can only talk from my experience. But as a kid growing up with dyslexia and, dyscalculus and stuff like that, I was always told, no, you'll never do this. You'll never do that. And for a long time, I listened to it. I really thought I was a piece of shit. I was going nowhere, couldn't do anything. And then I just, said, why? And I just started following, treating life as a kind of like consciousness in life as like an equation, right? You throw something into it, it jumbles it up, and it gives it back to you, kind of like a lotto machine. And I found that life for me is if I find something interesting, I'll just throw it out there, and life will either throw it right back at my face and say, no, that's stupid, or I'll just run and do this amazing thing. I'll meet new amazing people. So my inner drive to be better than I was yesterday is to, one, help people and limit human suffering, but two, just see where this wild ride can take me. I kind of also think of it as a roller coaster, right? If life's a roller coaster, I want to end up at the end, beat up, scarred, and lived it to its fullest. Not this I want to take risk. I want to figure out what those risks lead me. I don't want to live this contained, easy-going life with no highs, no lows. I want to experience the full ride and say, wow, that was awesome. And if that makes any sense. So that's why.
I think there was a Hunter Thompson quote in there somewhere.
Possibly.
Yeah.
I read a bunch of things and I go, wow, and then I forget the author's name. So if I took from an author, I would like to give them the credit, but I don't know who they are. So I'm not saying that's for me.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's amazing.
Some Hunter Thompson.
No, I love the notion of like identity and who you believe you can be. And I think the big secret really is that people can be whoever they want to be. And that when you sit at tables with people who do incredibly well, you realize there's nothing really that special about them aside from the risk that they took or the efforts that they made or the belief that they had. But like, they're not the super genius that a lot of times people think, or, and they're not people who, are any different or more special. And I think that that's the thing to walk away from, that for me, that I walk away from all the time. And it's always inspiring to me because people find what works for them. They double down on their strengths. They kind of keep their weaknesses wherever they're going to be, and they just move forward. And I think all of us have that potential. We all have things we're amazing at. And if we can double down on that, we can really leverage that to get wherever we want to go.
As we're wrapping up, because we're wrapping up on, or closing in on an hour and 53 minutes. I don't know why I say it, 153 minutes.
Yeah, I ran out of storage on my phone. So I had to delete some things to come back on.
So are there any social media accounts that you want to promote or any upcoming events that you would like to promote?
No, but thank you so much for asking. People can follow me on Twitter at Dr. Gurner, DrGurner. And I'm always happy to chat. So feel free to pop on and interact, and I'm happy to connect with whomever.
You are very interactive on Twitter. I like.
Oh, every single
Definitely.
interaction I've had with you has been amazing. You're such a sweetheart, and I appreciate talking to me, the little guy. I appreciate you so much.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Thank you.
We're all the same out there. Great to meet you guys. I feel like I knew you before coming on the show, just from your Twitter presence. I don't think.
Yeah, same.
I don't think I'm connected with Steven.
I believe I follow you because I'm like, wow, this person's really wise. I'm very selective with who I follow on Twitter. I try to keep it below 200 just because I try to keep out noise rather and like focus on what I want to hear. And when Cole was like, yeah, go follow her, learn about her, and I was like, okay. And I was like, whoa, whoa, you are well worth following.
Very inspirational.
Absolutely, yeah. A lot of wisdom that I could take away, and even through the comments, because you end up responding to people. and even through your replies, there's a lot of wisdom in that too.
I try to, my Twitter strategy is I follow everyone outside of the kind of job that I do, because it helps me learn so much about the jobs that they do. So like real estate Twitter, finance Twitter, Bitcoin folks, whoever is out there, I want to learn from them. Artists, physicists, I want to learn more about those things, because I think that makes my own thinking a lot more interesting, and it makes me more creative. So to be able to see things from different angles. So thank you guys for always being such a great presence on Twitter, and hopefully we can keep interactive.
Yeah, I was gonna say, don't feel bad if you don't follow me, by the way. There's a lot of random posting too that goes on there. I won't feel offended whatsoever.
No, I didn't know you were a part of this.
Yeah. So. Sometimes I'll be tweeting and it's just like me shit posting for the day. I just like, I don't know, just like dump something on there, shit post, and then Dr. Julie will comment, and I'm like, oh shit, I forgot. So somebody respectable follows me.
Thanks so much. Have a great evening.
Yeah.
Bye.